been a while since we came to Kantha. I think first time we came about 8 years ago to Kantha before the hospital ready. I would like to thank Dr. for still including me and regional friend and also P.An. I'm gonna share experience with MR in acute stroke. We are a new center. We just started about 2 years ago in 2020 in the midst of pandemic. It's a small teaching hospital, about 400 beds only, compared to some centers in Vietnam is much bigger. Our center is a bit focused on neuro and also urology and orthopedics. This is outskirts of Kuala Lumpur, close to administrative center, in between KL to airport. When we first start, we have a team with neurologists and emergency physician, and also especially important is intensivist, which is the intensive care, and we have a dedicated emergency. We actually copy something like S.I.S here, and some of the ideas actually from this hospital. There are 5 in our team who's doing mainly the neuro intervention side, but is still done by our team also. So we have some articles on how we start, and also we use the term rescue also. We begin with MR first policy in our center. So all patients whose code red and yellow is MR first, unless it's contraindicated for some other things. So we publish also our protocol, but it's actually nothing new. It's just the 3 protocol, which is start with the DWI and followed by others. So in the during the scan, after the 3rd sequence, we decide whether we should thrombolize or plan for thrombectomy, or we just put the patient on medical therapy. So if we were to proceed with thrombolysis, most of the cases, the initial dose is given in the MR room. So it's given in MR, so while the infusion is running, we still continue some of other sequences so we can understand more. And if patient going for thrombectomy, while preparing for the room, the preparation for the thrombectomy, we still continue some of the sequence. So it really does not delay the treatment per se. When we first start, we have about small number of cases actually, but the percentage of patients who we intervene, either thrombolysis or thrombectomy, is rather high compared to the other centers in our country. One of the reasons we believe because we can pick up the patient or choose the patient better, and we have a very low case of patients who are normal or TIAs only who get treatment, because we are pretty sure if patient there is no stroke or TIA on MR, you can clearly exclude those cases. This year we have a roughly similar rate, And also the pickup on the stroke mimics and hemorrhagic is kind of also the same. So we think it's going to be stabilized with this percentage. As I mentioned, we have about 20% rate of treatment, so we believe that's relatively high and is aided because of the MR. And the mean door to imaging is actually less than 30 minutes, but we wrote here most of the cases are less than 30, but less than 60. But majority of the cases is actually less than 30 minutes from the ED department when the patient reached to the MR. And the DTN, door to needle, is majority are less than 60 minutes and average is 41 for the initial data. We try to achieve actually the DTI door to imaging 20 minutes because that's the standard for the CT, but it's not that high. Actually, MR, of course, there are a little bit of delay, but it's compensate with the patient selection. So we believe there is still a lot of benefit with the MR. As you can see, majority of the cases actually within the time for the treatment. So we do not believe, or from our limited experience, it does not really delay the treatment. It may delay a little bit the imaging, but it does not really delay the overall treatment. And the other question which we used to have is whether we can detect bleed or not, because we are so used to CT. We actually detect bleed better with MR. And sometimes it's like it's a little bit ironic also when we detect the bleed on MR, small bleed, very clearly. So we update our neurosurgeon, but they will request for CT because everything is CT for the surgeon. And then in some cases, we don't see the bleed. It's very subtle, so the surgeon are not convinced with the bleed, but we show on the MR there is a bleed. So it's a bit controversial there. In terms of the cost, yes, in terms of the charge, overall, I think in our country and probably in many other countries also, is maybe it's a little bit on the expensive side, but about 50% of the cases is done not during the usual business hours. It was done after hours or on-call time. And a lot of centers, they don't do MR during the on-call time. So it's actually it's a waste of resources also. So we are filling in actually to bring down the cost, actually, if you start the MR there. And I believe the technology of MR grow pretty fast, and the pricing is, I think, is coming down quite fast also. So it's maybe about 20 or 30% more than CT, which maybe can compensate the cost. Okay, I will show some cases. 73 years old with NIHS score of 13. Patient was thrombolized and thrombectomy. What we want to show in this case is what things that we can see which we don't really see on the CT. One of it is the prominent vein sign. After then on the MR day 5, there is loss of the prominent vein sign. We don't see this in all cases of LVO, but in a lot of cases of LVO who are significantly improved after revascularization, we do see this sign. So we believe that this might relate with the deoxygenation. So maybe in the cases where the collateral is good, or patient who already have ICAT, who already stable with the reduced supply, they may not have this sign significantly. But we don't have a big data yet on that. Hemorrhagic infarct. Now, the detection of the hemorrhagic infarct in DWI is so obvious that even our junior guys also can pick up. So it's much better than CT. So when we do the first sequence on the DWI, if there is hemorrhagic infarct, we can already detect actually. So it really saves the time much more than CT. You will see this kind of sign on the DWI. And we did a review, we are supposed to publish soon, even for the junior radiology, when we double blind the patient on the bleed, almost 100% they can detect bleed on the DWI. As you can see in this case, the bleed is rather subtle compared to on the MR. So if you have the first two sequences, it's already enough to convince that we don't need to proceed further, there is a bleed. The other lesion the other sign that we like is the stagnant sign, especially when we want to decide in a low NIHS score cases. So this is mismatch on the admission, thrombolysis given. We'll see this, the stagnant sign on the distal, M2, M3. On MR day 5, there is small bleed. This is previous one, there is no more here. The black blood sequence. We are not too sure actually on the BB sequence whether it is the enhancement is mainly at the clot or at the stagnation vessel, part of the vessel. So we do see the enhancement in the plaque also on the black blood sequence. Like in this case, we see very clearly the stagnant sign. So it gives us a lot of confidence for us to proceed, even though the NIHS score is low. In another case, the stagnant sign and the prominent vein sign on the MR. Okay. There is this one also, is this, in this case, you can see the loss of the vessel. You know, this is, so we decided for DAPT, but this patient, they deteriorate and the repeated MR, so the mismatch, we proceed with thrombolysis, this failing collaterals, so we proceed with thrombect and restore it again. But what we want to show is the sign. Another case is the clot sign, is something like maybe MCA dense sign in the CT, which we can see quite clearly. This is a different case to show the clot sign. You can see the clot sign here and the enhancement on the BB. And this is the distal enhancement, the stagnant sign on the BB. This is post recanalization, and we have a loss of clot sign that is normal here, normal enhancement, and there is still a break of BBB, blood-brain barrier sign on the BB, which this is a nice case, slide of my friend, is the branch arteriomatous disease on the blood sequence on the lenticulostriae artery. So you can see the enhancement, but we can trace it quite clearly. So this patient, we proceed actually with thrombolysis. So as I mentioned, the controversies, CT more reliable to rule out bleed? No. Delay maybe on the imaging time, but the overall treatment is not really delay. Cost is actually controversial also to me. Having said that, I'm not advocating MR in many centers because it's a little bit complicated probably to start the MR first policy in acute stroke. But we are happy we managed to do that, and we do see a lot of value. We don't want to go back to CT. But we are not saying no to CT, but we won't go back to CT. We believe MR is the future for the imaging, and then we have more information on MR. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sobri Muda, for your nice presentation. Do you have any question from floor? Yeah.
Thank you very much. Very nice question, Prof. Sobri. I have a question. In some paper, they are stated that if we use MRI, especially when we perform SWI sequence, then we can find the microbleeds. And in some paper, it is stated that if the microbleeds more than 10, then this is some relative contraindication for doing recanalization treatment like thrombolysis. How often do you find the microbleeds more than 10 in SW?
Yes, we do see the microbleeds. Our issue is not so much with the bleed, our issue is with the neurologists. Because the neurologists, when we say, oh, there is small bleed, and everybody gets scared, they don't even want to start the single antiplatelet even. So which, because even when we say the bleed is probably, is kind of old, it's kind of early. If you see, I think we have one case which we did the, we have one case which is multiple lesion. So there is a bleed, but we convinced the neurologist to still give. And they proceed with the, oh, sorry, I don't have this. I don't have this case. We still proceed, and patient is okay. There's if the microbleed is old or is the number is not too many, we can I think we can still proceed. It's like it's an old stroke. This is the case. It's actually because this is the case. You have patient have bleed here, and the stagnant sign is on the other side with the prominent vein sign. So he's very convinced that patient has stroke. A patient have acute ischemic stroke, so it should be treated, but the neurologists are a bit worried about the bleed here. So we still proceed. This is post treatment. So we found out patient actually maybe have some hemorrhagic mats or something, but at least the treatment done, and it doesn't not really cause the bleed.
Yeah, nice presentation. With, you know, on your imaging sequence, you have the opportunity to try to see if the underlying etiology is ICAD. So do you stop when you see a large vessel occlusion, or do you try to figure out before you go in for thrombectomy whether there could be underlying ICAD?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, we do see some of the cases with NHS score more than 6, but not too high, with just enhancement of the plaque, but without the stagnant sign. So we are more, in those cases, sometimes we just do the angio. If there is collateral is good, we don't touch, and then we plan for stent, ICAD stenting during that admission, rather than we acutely stent or we actively need. So to me, from our limited experience, it helps. It helps for us to identify it's just purely ICAD, or it's actually ICAD with clot and also the stagnant sign. So those is really helpful, actually.
No more questions, so no. The time is limited, so the last question.